It was the 1930s. White America was still whirling from the 1920s. The atmosphere was electric, exciting, and full of anticipation of what's to come. To white America, the American dream was a little more than a dream. It had become a reality. The American dream was more believable than attempting to walk on the moon. But soon those hardy times and indescribable adventures would turn to cold, cruel reality. A reality that stood closer than a friend who became an enemy. The enemy was the Great Depression. The Great Depression was like waking up to an inescapable nightmare for white America. But what seemed like an unbearable reality for white America was an all too familiar reality to black America. Efforts to try to recuperate from a devastating financial tragedy, the Tulsa, Oklahoma race massacre, caused by vindictive, hateful white racists 9 years prior to the Great Depression, was a seemingly impossible task for black America. I'm sure the question on every black American's mind was, will they ever have any kind of relief? Was there such a thing as relief for those called black American? In a nutshell, the answer was no. Along with the Great Depression, black Americans had to fight and demand for their basic necessities such as food, a roof over their heads, and a job. You see, businesses such as Ford Motor told black Americans through a humiliating sign that they weren't wanted, along with dogs and Mexicans. Shameful. Even though there were unspeakable harsh times for black America, fortunately there was a group looking out for them. The United Auto Workers forced Henry Ford to negotiate a union contract that prohibited Ford Motors from firing black American workers, making way for returning white veterans. When blacks were first hired during the war at Ford, they were assigned only to do the lowest level and most strenuous job classifications. But the United Auto Workers fought to open more skilled assignments to black Americans. By the 1950s, post-war consumer boom created growing demands for automobiles. The Ford Richmond plant had no room to expand. In 1953, Ford decided to close their Richmond plant and move to Milpitas, California, a suburb of San Jose, which was rural at the time. Today, Milpitas is a part of what is now called Silicon Valley. Of course, Ford's new location required houses to be built. True to form, the Federal Housing Administration prohibited homes from being sold to black Americans, even though they made as much as white Americans. Black Americans had to choose to either give up their good industrial jobs and move to apartments in segregated neighborhoods in San Jose or endure long commutes to Milpitas. What kind of choice was that? In the meantime, more white suburbs were built in Rollinwood, and Richmond became predominantly a black city, and you know what that meant. Every resource that was connected to white Americans was ripped out of the city and implemented into the suburbs. This is why areas that are mainly resided by black Americans become abandoned financially. It's not for a lack of trying. It's due to a lack of money. Thank God that some souls refuse to succumb to society's evil indoctrination of blatant racism. At the end of World War II, Stanford University in Palo Alto, south of San Francisco, recruited a man named Wallace Stegner to teach creative writing. Unfortunately, Northern California still battled the ever-increasing demand for housing. Stegner adopted a plan that would combine working and middle-class families who were unable to find housing. They were a mixed group of professions such as teachers, city employees, carpenters, and nurses. Together they formed a co-op. Of the first 150 families, there were 3 black American families. Keep that in mind. The cooperative was called Peninsula Housing Association of Palo Alto. They would go on to purchase a 260-acre ranch near Stanford campus to build 400 houses. Not only would they build houses, their project included restaurants, recreational facilities, shopping area, and gas stations. This could be a utopia for not only the co-op, but the surrounding community. The co-op would soon find itself in a jam of a big kind. Banks refused to finance their construction nor issue mortgages without government approval. Do I need to tell you how this ended? Remember the 3 black families out of the 150 families which formed the cooperative? So that means it was 147 white families and only 3 black families. Anywho, the Federal Housing Administration would not insure loans to the cooperative that included 3 whole black American families. Stegner had a conscience, fortunately. He recommended against complying with the demand to change their cooperative to an all-white organization. How many good old folks would have gladly complied to the Federal Housing Administration openly racist ways? The co-op wanted to make this happen, so they proposed to include a quota system in its bylaws, promising that the number of black Americans in the Peninsula Housing Association would not exceed California's overall population. Do you think that worked? Well, be on the lookout for part 3 where you will hear the answer. Until then, always know that seeds planted, good or bad, will always be reaped.